when my fiance, Vaughn, and my best friend, Eliana Sinclair, drug me and dragged me into the penthouse suite of the richest man in the capital, I breathe a sigh of relief. At long last I'm home. Kai assumes I've lost my mind under the threat of impending doom and viciously grips my chin. Our company's survival depends on this project, you bitch. I hear there's a woman Mr. Harlan has never gotten over, even after all these years, and your face just happens to look a little like hers. You'd better serve him well. Once we secure the project, I might even be generous enough to give you some money. Eliana covers her mouth and giggles beside him. That's right. You should thank your lucky stars that you get to serve Mr. Harlan. Don't be ungrateful. When the drug takes effect, I'm violently shoved through the gilded doors. No one notices that as I lean back against the leather couch, my eyes are filled with mockery. The ruthless, cold-blooded Mr. Harlan Kai and Eliana are talking about, the man who treats his substitute lovers as nothing more than playthings, is actually my biological father, Tristan Harlan. Today, they've personally delivered me right back to Dad's side. Tomorrow, they'll learn what it means to live a life worse than death. The drug's effects crept through my veins, and even the slightest movement of my fingers sent a dull ache through my bones. I peeled my eyes open and focused on the hand-painted, gold-gilded irises on the ceiling. It was the Harlan family's crest. Before I turned 18, that flower had been embroidered onto the collar of every one of my haute couture nightgowns. My fiancé Vaughn's voice was thick with greed beyond the door. Eliana, are you sure this intel is reliable? Tristan is really coming back to this suite tonight. My best friend, Eliana Sinclair, could barely contain the excitement in her voice. I bought this intel from his driver for 20 grand. He'll be here at 11 p.m. on the dot. Once he pushes open the door and sees a woman lying in his bed who looks exactly like the woman he's always loved. She scoffed. There's no way he would pass up a meal that's been served right to his mouth. Who knows? If Mr. Harlan likes what he sees, that $10 billion project in the south of the city will be ours. After hearing the two of them snickering incessantly outside the door, I bit down hard on the tip of my tongue. The metallic sweetness of blood instantly flooded my throat. I had worked myself to the bone for Kai's lousy startup, pulling all-nighters until I was coughing up blood. I had treated Eliana as my best friend, only to find them in bed together in the apartment I'd rented with my own hard-earned money. And now, they had no qualms about acting like pimps, putting a clear price tag on me, and sending me to another man's bed. My stomach spasmed violently. My nails dug in so deep they broke against the leather upholstery. Yet even that pain was nothing compared to the agony roiling inside me. Little did they know that my father was Tristan Harlan. Years ago, he had cheated on Mom with a starlet, and in her despair, Mom had slit her wrists and taken her own life. I had run away from home in a fit of rage. All these years, Dad and I had tacitly stayed out of each other's lives. He had done nothing but deposit money into my bank account, terrified that I might suffer hardships or go without. Kai and Eliana thought I was an orphan who was living off my parents' inheritance and squandering it. That was the only reason they dared to treat me as a bargaining chip without a moment's hesitation. Dad might have been a lecherous bastard, but he was fiercely protective of his own. Many months ago, when a spoiled scion made an inappropriate remark to me, Dad immediately drove him into bankruptcy. If he ever found out that these two scumbags had sent me to his bed as a plaything, by the time he was done with them, even death would be a luxury they could only dream of. Oh, I almost forgot. Eliana deliberately raised her voice. Once we secure the deal with Harlan Group, we should hold our wedding. I want that diamond ring Abigail had her eyes on, but never had the heart to buy. Kai chuckled indulgently. Sure. I'll use the money I make from selling her to buy you that ring. I stared at the ceiling, the chill in my eyes turning to solid ice. Their intel was right. Dad would indeed come here because it was his and Mom's wedding anniversary. Mom had taken her own life in this very room. Every year, he came back here to mourn her. Every single year on this day, countless people would send women to his doorstep. This year, however, that little surprise happened to be me. The very next second, the door swung open. Kai strode toward me and yanked me by the hair. A searing pain shot through my scalp. Don't hold this against me, Abigail Harlan. If you want someone to blame, blame yourself for having no power or influence. You deserve to be sold off like cheap goods. Even if you're toyed to death tonight, you must make Mr. Harlan happy. I didn't have any power or influence. I looked at his triumphant face, the corners of my mouth curling into a derisive smile. Kai, you'd better pray that when the night's over, there's enough left of you to bury. You've still got the nerve to run your mouth? Eliana marched forward and slapped me hard across the face. A deafening ringing exploded in my ears. Let's change her clothes. Mr. Harlan will be here any minute now. Eliana smirked as she ripped open my coat and slipped a skimpy, translucent lingerie slip onto my body. You really do look like a filthy whore, she snickered, patting my cheek in satisfaction. I lay face down on the waterbed, drowning in humiliation. Slowly I clenched my fists. These two idiots had stripped Tristan Harlan's own flesh and blood bare, and delivered her to his bed. The sheer depravity of it was beyond anything I'd ever heard of. Immediately after, I was hauled up by Kai and Eliana and dragged out of the suite like a dead dog. At the end of the hallway, more than a dozen bodyguards stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, their intimidating presence radiating an icy, oppressive air. The man leading them strode toward us. I kept my eyes half-lidded, but I recognized him. Hugh Smith. 7 years ago, he was merely a perimeter guard who wasn't even qualified to open doors for me. I had never expected Hugh to have risen through the ranks to become Dad's right-hand man, while I had been wandering outside all these years. The arrogant and domineering demeanor that Kai and Eliana had displayed just moments ago vanished into thin air, replaced by servile, obsequious smiles. Hugh, we've brought her to you. Hugh cast a condescending look at them. His gaze was like frost-tipped blades as it ultimately landed on me. I'm sure you know Mr. Harlan's rules. The women who are sent here must be virgins. Kai nodded frantically, his waist bending until it was almost parallel to the ground. We know. She's an obedient virgin. Hugh snorted before sizing me up. It just so happens that Mr. Harlan's in a foul mood tonight, and is looking for a plaything to pass the time. If this woman fails to satisfy him, the two of you will be buried alongside her. Kai flinched and abruptly shoved me forward. Cat got your tongue? Answer him. I steadied my footing, a cold chuckle escaping my throat. The three of you really have a death wish. Kai flew into a rage, whipped his hand back, and struck me hard across the cheek. I told you to answer him, you bitch. What the hell are you putting on airs for? The blow sent me staggering back several steps before my knees crashed hard against the ice-cold marble floor. The skimpy lingerie on my body tore, leaving me in a thoroughly disheveled state. Kai gritted his teeth and snarled. How dare you act high and mighty in front of Hugh, you useless bitch. Hugh watched the whole spectacle coldly and ultimately said, Mr. Harlan despises disobedient playthings the most. The last one who dared throw a tantrum in front of him had her ashes scattered into the moat to feed the crocodiles ages ago. The blood instantly drained from Kai and Eliana's faces. Even their breathing seemed to stop for a second. I lowered my head, but from an angle they couldn't see. The corners of my lips slowly curled upward. After Mom died, Dad had chopped up the woman who had provoked her and fed her remains to the fish. From then on, he had developed a love-hate relationship with women, subjecting them to all manner of torment. Dad's methods were as brutal as ever. When that thought crossed my mind, a bloodthirsty thrill stirred in my eyes. My abnormal reaction didn't escape Hugh's notice. He narrowed his eyes slightly, a trace of imperceptible amusement flashing through them. You've got some nerve. Most women would have wet themselves the second they heard about the gators. He looked me up and down, a hint of approval creeping into his voice. Mr. Harlan's burning with rage tonight, and he needs someone with a backbone to take it out on. This fearless disposition of yours might actually tickle Mr. Harlan's fancy. If you can help him blow off steam to his heart's content, the rest of us might get a little something out of it, too. Kai's eyes instantly lit up when he heard that. He assumed that my half-dead appearance had genuinely caught Hugh's eye, and he felt emboldened. He grabbed a handful of my hair, forcing my head up. Excruciating pain shot through my scalp, but I bit down hard on my lower lip, refusing to make a sound. Look at her face and figure, Hugh. I guarantee she'll satisfy Mr. Harlan. Kai's eyes darted around before he lowered his voice, attempting to curry favor and fish for information. Hugh, if you don't mind me asking, why's Mr. Harlan in such a bad mood tonight? Also, I heard he's been searching for a woman he can never get over. What kind of divine person is she? Give us a hint, so we know what kind of profile to look for when we're sourcing women for him in the future. The very next second, Hugh's gaze hardened, and he looked at Kai as though he were staring at a corpse. Mr. Harlan's personal affairs are none of your damn business. Who do you think you are to pry into them? Kai's face instantly turned beet red. You're right. It's my fault. I shouldn't have asked. To mask his guilt and fear, he took out all his anger on me again. He abruptly drove his foot into my lower abdomen. My stomach churned violently, and I doubled over in pain, curling into a tight ball. Get your ass in there and do your job, you whore. Once you're inside, even if you have to wag your tail and beg like a bitch in heat, you'd better make damn sure Mr. Harlan's satisfied. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling forward. I endured the agonizing cramps in my abdomen, braced myself against the cold doorframe, and slowly straightened up. Kai had just asked why Dad was in such a bad mood. I sneered inwardly. I suppose this was probably nothing more than pouring salt on an open wound. 7 years ago, on the day Mom died, I had jabbed my finger in his face and cursed him, saying he would die without a child of his own. None of the women he had kept on the side had managed to bear him a child. On one hand, he had his only flesh and blood, a rebellious daughter who wanted nothing to do with him. On the other hand, he had his deceased wife, who could possibly be in a good mood with all that weighing on them. Now, to please him, even his own biological daughter was being treated like a prostitute and shoved onto his bed. I thought to myself, Dad, I'd love to see how you plan to explain yourself once this door is pushed open. I pushed open the rosewood door. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead, while beneath my feet lay a priceless, hand-woven rug. The air was thick with the scent of premium agarwood, and the sheer luxury was almost suffocating. The moment Kai saw what was inside, his eyes nearly popped out of his sockets. Holy shit! How much is that painting on the wall worth? Eliana's eyes gleamed with greed. Any one of those vases could probably buy our entire office building. Kai flashed me a lecherous grin. Once this bitch gives Mr. Harlan a good time tonight, he might reward us with a few things from this suite. I leaned against the doorframe with a stoic expression. My gaze swept over the enormous oil painting on the wall. The woman in it had gentle, delicate features. It was my mother. Meanwhile, a family portrait was partially visible on the sandalwood table beside it. Hugh noticed me staring intently at the oil painting and narrowed his eyes slightly. He warned me coldly, "Wipe that disgusting look off your face. A cheap whore like you only has any value because you happen to look a little like her." When I remained unfazed, his patience ran thin, and he grasped my wrist. His lecherous gaze raked over my torn lingerie. If he hadn't specifically asked for a virgin, I'd take you right here and now. A mocking smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Is this how Tristan trains his men? Looks like someone really ought to throw you into the moat and teach you a proper lesson. Hugh flew off the handle and raised his hand to slap me. Just then Kai gasped, "Wait! Why does the girl in this photo look so much like you when you were little?" He reached out to grab the photograph. "How dare you touch Mr. Harlan's belongings? Do you have a death wish?" A woman's shrill voice rang out. In walked a woman teetering on 4 3/4-inch red-bottomed stilettos, Vivian Kincaid. She was a partner at Harlan Group who had tried to seduce Dad. I had watched with my own eyes as Dad swept her out the door. I never would have imagined that, after all her persistence, Dad had eventually taken her in after all. However, the moment her gaze landed on my face, her arrogance instantly turned into venomous jealousy. "Your face?" Vivian looked down at me and pinched my chin, her eyes filled with utter madness. "You're nothing but a lowly plaything, yet you have the nerve to carry yourself like you own the place. Now get on your knees and answer me." I slapped her hand away, unable to hide the coldness in my eyes. "Get your filthy hands off me. Who the hell do you think you are to order me to get on my knees? Before you lay a finger on me, you'd better think very carefully about whether Tristan will chop you up and feed you to the fish." After hearing that, she was so furious that she cackled. Her face contorted with rage. "You've got some nerve," she snarled before slapping me. I jerked my head to the side. Her palm missed, causing her to stagger a step forward. Vivian shrieked hysterically. "Who the hell do you think you are?" I smiled. "What if I told you I'm the one woman Tristan could never have? Would you believe me?" After all, he'd spent all these years begging me just to see me, and I had never once agreed. In a way, that counted as being unattainable, right? As soon as the words left my mouth, a deathly silence blanketed the room. Vivian froze for a split second before the malice in her eyes overflowed. "Let's see how you can still be the woman he can't have if I ruin you today. Get over here and hold her down." Kai lunged at me and pinned me against the cold marble floor. "Miss Kincaid, please calm down. This bitch just doesn't know what's good for her. She's rotten to the core. Do whatever you want with her. If you cripple her, I'll take the blame." Eliana hurried after her and planted her foot firmly on the fingers I had braced against the floor. The pain shot straight to my heart, and cold sweat instantly soaked through my back. Vivian sneered and picked up a box cutter. Slowly, she crouched down and lifted my chin with the cold back of the blade. "What unattainable love. It's only because you happen to have a face you never should have been born with." The cold blade dragged across my skin, sending a deathly shiver down my spine. A single drop of crimson blood slowly trickled down the silver blade, before splattering onto the floor. "Imagine how nice it would be if I carved the word slut right into that pretty face of yours." Vivian raised the box cutter high above her head, poised to drive it down with all of her strength. With my life in danger, I tilted my head back and yelled at the top of my lungs, "Tristan Harlan, get your ass out here right now. If anything happens to me, you'll have to die with your eyes wide open." The moment the words left my lips, an eerie silence descended. Vivian could no longer contain her laughter and mockery. "You really are a shameless bitch. You haven't even seen Mr. Harlan yet, and you're already throwing yourself at him. How dare you call him by his name? You really have a death wish." The very next second, her gaze hardened, and she drove the tip of the blade into my face. Excruciating pain exploded through me like an electric shock. "Hold her down. Don't let her budge." Without a moment's hesitation, Kai pinned my hands down and forced my entire face against the cold floor. The sickening crunch of my finger bones shattering echoed in my ears. The agony blotted out my vision, and cold sweat instantly drenched my back. The man I had loved with every fiber of my being was now personally pushing me onto the chopping block, playing the butcher's most devoted lapdog. A line of searing heat slashed from the corner of my eye straight to my temple, and fresh blood instantly blurred my vision. Vivian erupted into a deranged cackle. "Once I ruin this face of yours, Let's see what you have left to be so arrogant about. Kai chimed in with a sycophantic grin. You're so right, Miss Kincaid. If this isn't enough to vent your rage, once you're done carving the word, let's take some explicit pictures. Let's see how she ever seduces another man again. Eliana sneered. We're letting her off too easily by slashing her face. Why don't we strip her bare and throw her into the fountain at the main entrance, so she knows what happens when she offends Miss Kincaid? As I listened to their revelry, the metallic tang of blood welled up in my throat. Every single wound they left on my body would become an epitaph carved onto their tombstones. Dad's methods would make them understand exactly what it meant to be unable to live or die. The very next second, Kai reached out and grabbed at the collar of my lingerie. I thrashed wildly, what little strength I had left exploding in a desperate bid to break free. However, he drove his knee into my spine, the heavy pressure forcing a dull snap from my vertebrae. Give it up. Right now you're nothing but a useless piece of meat on a butcher's block. An overwhelming wave of humiliation engulfed me. Vivian's smile became increasingly sadistic. She seized the last piece of fabric covering my body and yanked it off. Then, she whipped out her phone and rapidly pulled up a live streaming app with her other hand. Merely dumping her outside doesn't cut it. I'm going live. I want everyone in the capital to see just how filthy this whore truly is. Right at that hair-raising second, a deafening explosion shattered the air as the $10 million rosewood door was shoved open from the outside. A tall, imposing figure stormed in. Who gave you permission to run amok here? The manic look on Vivian's face instantly turned into delight. Raising her phone, she spoke in a sweet, coquettish voice. Mr. Harlan, you came at just the right time. I was just helping you teach a new toy who doesn't know her place a lesson. Kai hurriedly looked up, wagging his tail like a pug. Mr. Harlan, we specifically found you a woman who looks exactly like your first love, and she's a virgin. We just hope this gesture earns us a chance at that project in the western suburbs. Dad's footsteps came to a halt. His gaze swept past the crowd and landed on me where I lay sprawled in a pool of blood. He saw my face, streaked with blood and tears. The commanding presence that had made him seem like a king of the world shattered in an instant. I forced myself to lift my head and met his stunned gaze with a mocking smile. Tristan Harlan, you bastard. You killed your wife and abandoned your daughter. If you'd been 1 second later, you really would have ended up with no descendants for the rest of your life. The silence that fell over the penthouse suite was heavy enough to crush bone. Tristan Harlan stood frozen 3 paces from the doorway. His custom-tailored coat hung broad and dark over his shoulders, his silver-flecked temples rigid, under the warm glare of the crystal chandelier. But all the aristocratic chill, all the legendary cruelty that made the financial titans of the capital tremble. In backroom boardrooms, it all evaporated the second his gaze locked onto the pool of crimson on the rug, onto the torn slip, onto my shattered fingers pinned under Kai Vaughn's heavy boot, onto the blood trickling from my cheekbone down toward my jaw. Abigail. The name scraped out of Tristan's throat like rusted iron grinding together. It wasn't a patriarch's bark. It was the bewildered whimper of a man whose heart had just been ripped out of his chest and shown to him while still beating. Kai, deaf to the nuance and utterly blinded by his own ambition, didn't catch the horror in that voice. He genuinely believed Tristan was surprised by the uncanny resemblance. Grinning like a dog waiting for a bone, Kai gave my shoulder another vicious shove. Mr. Harlan, she's a little wild, I know. Called you a bastard right to your face. Can you believe the insolence? But don't you worry, sir. Miss Kincaid and I were just teaching her how to behave. Give her half an hour and she'll be on her knees begging to serve you. Vivian Kincaid, still holding the box cutter, smoothed down her skirt with her free hand, a triumphant smirk curving her glossy lips. Tristan, darling, she's just an uneducated little tramp. I knew you missed your late wife, so when Kai brought her in, I figured we could break her in for you. A quick lesson with the blade keeps these substitutes docile. She never finished the sentence. Tristan moved so fast the air cracked. There was no warning, no preliminary shout. A heavy, 6'2" frame exploded across the hand-woven rug, and the back of Tristan's leather-gloved hand struck Kai across the skull. The impact sounded like a baseball bat slamming into wet meat. Kai flew sideways, his body crashing through an antique mahogany display table. Porcelain shards, ancient jade artifacts, and splintered wood rained down on him. As he screamed, clutching his crushed jaw, several teeth clattered onto the floorboards in a spray of red foam. Tristan! Vivian shrieked, stumbling back in her stilettos, the box cutter slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor. What are you? Tristan didn't spare her a single breath. He dropped to both knees directly and the blood smeared across the marble. Didn't care about his bespoke Italian trousers or the $100,000 cashmere coat soaking up the gore. His hands, large, scarred and trembling violently, hovered an inch above my shoulders, terrified that touching me might break whatever was left. Abby. His voice broke, splintering into raw, ragged fragments. Abby. Baby, look at me. Look at Dad. Eliana Sinclair, standing near the drapes, let out a choked, half-strangled squeak. Her face went from flushed pink to the color of wet chalk in half a second. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the velvet curtain just to keep from hitting the floor. Dad? She whispered, her lips trembling so hard her teeth clicked. What? What did he just say? I lay there, staring up into the face of the man I had spent 7 long years running from. The man whose infidelity had driven my mother off the balcony of this very suite. A ragged, bloody laugh bubbled up from my throat, staining my own lips. Look at you, Tristan. I rasped, the pain in my shattered fingers making my vision swim with black spots. You wanted a plaything? You wanted a substitute. For Mom? Congratulations. Your lapdogs brought you the real thing. Shut up, don't talk. Tristan's voice choked on a sob. A billionaire who controlled half the shipping lanes and high-rises in the country was weeping, tears cutting tracks down his weathered, terrifying face. He violently stripped off his coat and wrapped it around my bruised, half-naked body, lifting me with the gentleness one might use for cracked porcelain. Hugh, get the medical team up here right now. Call Dr. Chun. If he's not here in 4 minutes, I'll burn his hospital to the ground. At the doorway, Hugh Smith stood as pale as a corpse. The arrogance that had dripped from his every pore moments ago was completely gone. His eyes bulged in utter, paralyzing terror as the realization hit him like a freight train. The girl he had threatened with the moat. The girl he had leered at and called a cheap whore. She wasn't a stray gift from a desperate sycophant. She was Abigail Harlan, the sole heiress to the Harlan dynasty. The only living thing on this earth Tristan Harlan would burn the world down to protect. And Mr. Harlan, Hugh stammered, dropping to his knees so fast his kneecaps cracked against the marble. I didn't know. I had no idea. Hugh, Tristan said. The voice wasn't loud. It was soft. It carried the absolute, freezing void of an executioner's chamber. If my daughter loses a single drop of blood because your men delayed the medics, I won't just feed you to the crocodiles. I will peel your skin off while you watch, and then I will find everyone who shares your surname. Hugh collapsed entirely, his forehead slamming repeatedly against the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Mercy. Mr. Harlan, mercy. I didn't know. I swear to God. I didn't know. In the corner, Kai was struggling to sit up through the wreckage of the broken table, blood and spit pouring from his ruined mouth. His brain, slow and thoroughly poisoned by greed, was still trying to reject reality. Mr. Harlan. Kai wheezed, clutching his dislocated jaw with one trembling hand. You're mistaken. She's Abigail. She's an orphan. She worked in my marketing department for 3 years. She doesn't have a family. She's a nobody. Tristan slowly stood up, holding me tight against his chest with his left arm, while his right hand hung loose at his side. He walked over to where Kai was crawling. The leather of Tristan's shoe pressed down onto Kai's right hand, the exact hand Kai had used to pin my fingers to the floor. An orphan, Tristan murmured. He applied pressure. Crack. Kai threw his head back and let out a high-pitched, inhuman shriek that rattled the glass in the chandelier. The delicate bones in his fingers and palm splintered into dust under the heel of Tristan's boot. She worked for you for 3 years, Tristan said, pressing down harder, grinding his heel back and forth until Kai's screams dissolved into breathless, gagging sobs. She refused every dime of my trust fund because she hated my guts. She lived in a drafty apartment and ate cheap takeout because she wanted to earn her own way. And you miserable bottom-feeding insect, you thought she was yours to break. Please, Mr. Harlan. I loved her. We were engaged. It was Eliana's idea. It was Vivian's idea. Kai shrieked, desperately throwing everyone else under the bus as vomit and bile mixed with the blood on his shirt. Across the room, Eliana dropped to her knees, wetting herself where she stood. No. Kai, you bastard. You said she was just a tool. You said once we got the contract, we'd ditch her in a ditch somewhere. Both of you, Tristan said coldly, not even looking at them, will have plenty of time to discuss the details in the basement. He turned his gaze toward Vivian Kincaid. Vivian had backed herself against the floor-to-ceiling windows, her chest heaving, the designer dress she wore suddenly looking like a clown costume. She was smart enough to know that tears wouldn't work on Tristan Harlan. She had spent 5 years trying to climb into his bed, studying his every move, calculating his weaknesses. Tristan, Vivian said, her voice shaking violently despite her best efforts to sound composed. We have business contracts. My family holds 12% of the Southern Port project. You can't touch me over a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was your daughter. If you harm me, the Kincaid family will pull their capital. The Kincaid family? Tristan tilted his head, a grotesque, humorless smile, touching his lips. By dawn tomorrow, the Kincaid family won't have enough capital to buy a loaf of bread. Your father will be in handcuffs for offshore tax evasion, and your brother's shell companies will be seized by the Federal Oversight Bureau. Vivian's eyes widened until the whites were completely bloodshot. You had those files all along. I keep files on everyone, Tristan whispered. I let you hang around because you were useful at dinner parties and you stayed out of my way. But you put a blade to my child's face. He looked down at the box cutter on the floor. Pick it up, Tristan commanded. Vivian froze. What? Pick up the blade, Vivian. Or I'll have my men use a rusty hacksaw. Trembling so hard she could barely breathe, Vivian dropped to her hands and knees and picked up the small silver tool. Carve the word you wanted to carve, Tristan said softly. On your own forehead. Right now. If the letters aren't deep enough to bleed through 3 layers of gauze, my security team will do it for you with a trench knife. No, please. Tristan, my face. Do it. The word was a thunderclap. Sobbing hysterically, Vivian brought the razor to her own brow. Her hands shook, the metal biting into her fair skin, a thick ribbon of dark blood welling up. Immediately and spilling down over her eye. The screams that followed echoed through the penthouse suite like the cries of the damned. I leaned my head against Tristan's chest, feeling the heavy, frantic thrum of his heartbeat. The pain in my body was an ocean of fire, but inside my mind, a chilling calm was taking over. Dad, I whispered, my voice barely audible above Vivian's agonized wailing. Tristan instantly stiffened. His fierce, bloodthirsty aura vanished, replaced by sheer panic. He looked down at me, his eyes wide, terrified that I was slipping away. Yes, Abby? Dad's here. I'm here. I've got you. Don't kill them yet, I murmured, my eyes half closed as the darkness at the edge of my vision began to pull me under. Dying is too easy. I want them to watch everything they ever cared about turn to ash. Tristan swallowed hard, his throat working as he tightened his grip around me. Whatever you want, Abby, he promised, his voice thick with an oath written in blood. Every single thing you want. The presidential suite of St. Jude's private hospital was locked down under military-grade security. 24 bodyguards dressed in solid black lined the marble corridors of the top floor. No nurses or junior doctors were permitted without biometric clearance. Inside the operating suite, the country's leading orthopedic surgeon and the chief of reconstructive plastic surgery worked for 5 continuous hours, under the watchful, unblinking glare of Tristan Harlan, who refused to leave the room even to change out of his bloodstained shirt. When I finally woke up, the smell of sterile saline and high-grade antiseptic had replaced the suffocating stench of agarwood and blood. My left hand was encased in a rigid fiberglass cast, my fingers pinned and set with surgical precision. The right side of my face throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, covered by a cool, medicated dressing. Beside the bed, slumped in a high-backed leather chair, sat Tristan. He looked 10 years older than he had the previous night. The sharp, untouchable corporate titan was gone. In his place was a hollow-eyed man with stubble, darkening his jaw and dark purple rings bruising the skin beneath his eyes. The moment my eyelids fluttered, he jerked awake. Abby. He leaned forward, hovering his hands over the edge of the mattress, not daring to touch me without permission. Are you awake? Does it hurt? I can call Dr. Chen for more morphine. I don't need morphine, I said. My voice was raspy, dry as sandpaper. He immediately reached for a crystal glass with a bent glass straw, carefully holding it to my lips. I took 2 sips of cool water. It soothed the burn in my throat, but it did nothing to quench the fire in my chest. The doctor said. Tristan began cautiously, watching my expression with painful hesitation. Your hand will recover 95% of its function. With physical therapy, the cut on your face was clean. We used biological glue and microsutures. There won't be a scar. I flew in the best cosmetic team from Switzerland at 3 a.m. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. You spent $5 million on a scratch. I would spend 50 billion, he snapped, his voice rough with emotion before softening instantly. I would burn the entire city down to keep you whole, Abby. You know that. I didn't know that, I said coldly. 7 years ago, when Mom was bleeding out on the balcony, you were in an upscale hotel with some 20-year-old model. Where was your $5 million then? The words struck Tristan like physical blows. He recoiled slightly, his shoulders sagging, his head dropping. I deserve that, he muttered, staring down at his own calloused hands. I deserve every curse you've ever thrown at me. But Abby, those people, the ones who did this to you, where are they? I interrupted. Tristan lifted his head. The sorrow in his eyes hardened into pure, obsidian malice. They're alive, he said. Just like you asked. He pulled a tablet from the bedside table and tapped the screen before handing it to me. The live feed showed an underground holding cell, cold bare concrete lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube. Kai and Eliana were curled up in opposite corners. Kai's right hand was wrapped in dirty gauze, his jaw swollen to the size of a grapefruit, drooling blood and mucus onto his knees. Eliana was rocking back and forth, her designer clothes shredded, muttering incoherently to herself. In the adjacent cell, Vivian Kincaid sat on a metal bench. Her forehead was wrapped in a crude, bloody bandage that failed to hide the jagged red lacerations underneath. Her phone had been placed on a small table outside the bars, permanently broadcasting the financial news network. On the screen, a ticker ran continuously in bold red text. Kincaid Group shares plummet 84% following arrest of CEO for money laundering and trafficking charges. Vaughn Logistics declares bankruptcy after main creditors call in all loans. Simultaneously, Sinclair family assets frozen by tax regulators, properties seized. In 12 hours, Tristan said quietly, their families have ceased to exist in high society. Every contract Kai's firm had was voided. Every bank they owed money to has demanded full repayment by noon today. Their parents, their siblings, their business partners. Everyone has abandoned them like rats leaving a sinking ship. I watched the screen. Kai was crying, pounding his good fist against the concrete floor, screaming something that the muted microphone couldn't capture. It's not enough, I said quietly. Tristan didn't blink. Tell me what you want. I turned my head to look at him, my eyes burning with a cold, steady light. Kai wanted that $10 billion project in the western suburbs. He dreamed of standing on the stage at the Grand Hyatt, signing that contract and announcing his engagement to Eliana using the diamond ring bought with my blood. A dangerous smile spread across Tristan's lips. The formal signing ceremony and press gala is scheduled for Friday evening. Good, I said, pushing the blankets aside and struggling to sit up. Give them hope, Dad. Tristan reached out and gently supported my back. Hope. Let them think they have a way out. I whispered. Let them think that if they show up at the gala and beg the mysterious new president of Harlan Group, they might save their skins. Let them dress in their finest borrowed clothes and crawl through the front door. My gaze met Tristan's, and for the first time in 7 years, there was no hostility between us. Only the shared, predatory instinct of the Harlan bloodline. I want to take everything from them, I said. In front of everyone who ever mattered to them. By Thursday morning, the underground rumors in the capital had reached a fever pitch. Nobody knew exactly who had offended Tristan Harlan, but the catastrophic destruction of the Kincaid, Vaughn and Sinclair families was the hottest topic. From the stock exchange to the high-end country clubs. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange lifeline appeared. The Public Relations Division of Harlan Group released an official statement. The signing ceremony for the Southern Development Project will proceed as scheduled at the Grand Hyatt this Friday at 7 p.m. In addition, the chairman will formally step down and introduce the new chief executive officer and sole heir to the Harlan conglomerate. Along with the public notice, 3 golden VIP invitation cards were mysteriously delivered to the holding cells where Kai, Eliana, and Vivian were being kept under loose house arrest at an abandoned industrial warehouse. When the heavy steel door swung open, and an anonymous courier tossed the gilded envelopes onto the floor, Kai scrambled across the dirt like a starved dog, fighting for a bone. An invitation? Kai croaked through his wired jaw, his swollen fingers tearing at the seal. A VIP pass to the signing ceremony? Eliana snatched hers, her greasy hair falling over her hollow, sleep-deprived eyes. Is it real? Kai, is it real? It has the Harlan wax seal. Kai sobbed, laughing hysterically while tears carved clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. I knew it. I knew Tristan. Harlan wouldn't completely cut us off. That old bastard. He must have enjoyed Abigail after all. He took her, he had his fun, and this is our payout. Vivian, sitting against the damp wall, with a hideous scab forming across her forehead, sneered with bitter contempt. You absolute moron, Vivian rasped, though a flicker of desperate hope danced in her own eyes. Tristan didn't do this for you. He knows the Kincaid family has deep roots. He destroyed our shell companies to teach me a lesson, but he needs our logistics network to execute the Southern Port project. This invitation is his way of giving us a chance to negotiate terms. Who cares why? Eliana screamed, clutching the gold envelope to her chest as if it were oxygen. We're not going to prison. If we go to the gala, if we apologize properly to Mr. Harlan and the new CEO, we can get our companies back. We can survive this. Kai's ruined face twisted into a grotesque grin. Yes, we'll buy the best suits, rent the most expensive cars. We'll bring gifts. We'll tell the new CEO That we were the ones who provided Mr. Harlan with his favorite woman. We'll get a cut of the 10 billion. In their utter desperation, their minds had built a fortress of delusions. They couldn't accept that they were already dead, that the invitation wasn't a lifeline, but an execution warrant wrapped in gold leaf. Across town, in the private suite of the Harlan estate, I stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. The dressing on my face had been removed. A faint, razor-thin pink line stretched from the edge of my left eye toward my hairline, barely visible unless viewed under bright light. With a touch of high-coverage foundation, it was completely invisible. My left hand was out of the cast, supported by a sleek, custom-fitted carbon fiber brace that fit neatly under the silk sleeve of my gown. The dress was a masterwork of midnight blue velvet, hand-embroidered with silver irises along the hem and collar, the exact crest of the Harlan family. Around my neck hung the star of the Southern Sea, a 60-carat flawless blue diamond necklace that had once belonged to my mother. Tristan walked into the dressing room, wearing a tailored three-piece charcoal suit. In his hand, he held a leather folder containing the legal transfer documents for 49% of Harlan Group's controlling shares. He looked at me in the mirror, his breath catching slightly. You look. His voice wavered. You look just like your mother on the day we went public. I adjusted the silver cuff at my wrist, my reflection cold and composed. Mom was too gentle, Dad. She let other people walk all over her, and she broke her own heart trying to keep your world clean. I turned around, meeting his gaze squarely. I'm not Mom. I'm your daughter. And tonight, I'm going to show the city how a Harlan collects a debt. Tristan looked at me for a long moment. Then slowly a grim, prideful smile broke across his face. The stage is set, Abby, he said, offering his arm. Let's go greet your guests. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was packed with the elite of the capital. Billionaires, media moguls, high-ranking officials, and socialites clustered in small circles beneath the towering crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne while speculating on the evening's two big mysteries. Who was the new CEO of Harlan Group, and why had the Kincaid, Vaughn, and Sinclair families imploded overnight? At 6:45 p.m., the heavy gilded doors at the back of the ballroom opened and 3 figures crept inside. A collective murmur of disgust and shock rippled through the nearest crowd. It was Kai, Eliana, and Vivian. They had clearly spent their last remaining pennies to make themselves presentable, but the result was pathetic. Kai wore an ill-fitting tuxedo that couldn't conceal the bulky brace on his right arm or the heavy swelling in his jaw. Eliana had caked cheap foundation over her hollow cheeks, her rented diamond jewelry looking tacky against the backdrop of real wealth. Vivian was the worst of all. She wore a wide lace headband low over her brow, desperately trying to hide the jagged scabs and swelling on her forehead. But the ugly red bruising had leaked down around her eye sockets, making her look like a battered ghost. Look at them. Is that Vivian Kincaid? What happened to her face? I heard Kai Vaughn's company was liquidated by noon today. How did they even get into this room? Kai swallowed hard, his collar feeling like a noose. He forced a stiff serval smile and nudged Eliana. Hold your head up. We have VIP passes. Once we talk to the new CEO, these snobs will be begging for our attention again. Eliana clutched his arm, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Where is Tristan Harlan? Why hasn't he come out yet? He'll be here, Vivian hissed through clenched teeth, her nails digging into her clutch. And when he arrives, we stick to the script. We blame everything on Hugh Smith. We say Hugh went rogue, and we were just trying to help Tristan find closure with a substitute. Tristan is a businessman. He won't throw away a $10 billion partnership over an orphan girl. Right at that moment, the lights in the grand ballroom dimmed. A spotlight flared to life at the top of the grand marble staircase on the east side of the hall. The master of ceremonies stepped forward, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art acoustic system. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, tonight marks a new era for Harlan Group. Please welcome our chairman, Mr. Tristan Harlan, and the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer and sole heir to the Harlan Empire. A wave of polite, eager applause thundered through the room as Tristan stepped into the light. He looked every bit the ruthless emperor, tall, imposing, his expression carved from stone. But instead of walking down the stairs alone, he turned slightly, extending his arm with an attitude of profound reverence toward the figure walking behind him. A woman stepped into the circle of light. She wore a midnight blue velvet gown shimmering with silver irises. The star of the Southern Sea blazed with icy blue brilliance against her collarbone. Her hair was swept up, revealing high, aristocratic cheekbones, dark, fathomless eyes, and an aura of supreme, untouchable authority. The glass of champagne in Kai Vaughn's hand slipped. It hit the marble floor, shattering into 1,000 crystalline pieces, the pale liquid splashing across his polished shoes. No, Kai whispered, the sound dying in his throat. Eliana's jaw dropped so wide her lipstick cracked at the corners. She grabbed Kai's arm with such violent terror that her fingernails ripped through his suit. Sleeve. Kai. Eliana's voice was a high, thin squeal of utter madness. Kai. That's Abigail. Vivian Kincaid didn't speak. She took one step back, her heels tangling in the hem of her gown, and crashed heavily onto the floor, sending a tray of hors d'oeuvres flying as the guests around her gasped in revulsion. The orphan. Vivian whimpered, clawing at the lace headband on her forehead, as the room began to spin around her. The girl with no background. She wasn't a substitute. From the top of the staircase, my gaze swept slowly over the ocean of faces. And then with chilling accuracy, my eyes locked directly onto Kai, Eliana, and Vivian. I lifted a champagne flute from a silver tray held by an attendant, raising it slightly in their direction. The corners of my lips curled into a slow, merciless smile. Good evening, everyone. My voice echoed smoothly through the microphone, clear, melodic, and cold as winter frost. I am Abigail Harlan, and I'd like to welcome you all to my homecoming. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 500 of the most powerful people in the capital stood frozen, their eyes darting between me on the grand staircase and the 3 shivering wrecks collapsed on the floor near the entrance. Vaughn fell to both knees. He didn't care about the broken glass piercing his trousers or the champagne soaking into his skin. His brain had finally shattered under the weight of the truth. Every memory of the past 3 years flashed before his eyes. Abigail staying late at the office, redesigning marketing proposals that saved his failing startup from bankruptcy. Abigail casually tossing aside black credit cards with unlimited limits, claiming she preferred to earn her own living. Abigail telling him with a faint mocking smile, Kai, you'd better pray you never meet my father. He had thought she was an orphan putting on airs. He had thought she was a weak, powerless girl he could use, abuse, and discard to buy a diamond ring for. Another woman. Mr. Vaughn. My voice drifted down the staircase as I slowly descended, each click of my heels sounding like a hammer hitting a coffin nail. You look surprised to see me. Didn't you say I was an ungrateful bitch who should thank her lucky stars for the chance to serve the Harlan family? Gasps erupted through the ballroom. The socialites and business moguls stepped back from Kai, Eliana, and Vivian as if they were carrying the bubonic plague. What did he say? He drugged Abigail Harlan. My God. They tried to traffic Tristan Harlan's daughter to his own bed. Kai crawled forward on his hands and knees, dragging his broken fingers across the floorboards, leaving smears of blood on the polished marble. Abby, please. Kai wailed, tears and snot pouring down his face as he reached toward the hem of my dress. It was a mistake. I was manipulated. Eliana convinced me. She told me you had no family. She said you wouldn't mind helping the company. I loved you, Abby. We were going to get married. Tristan stepped down beside me, his cold eyes narrowing. Before Kai's hand could touch my shoe, 2 armed security officers stepped forward, planting their heavy boots squarely on Kai's shoulders and pinning him flat against the floor. You loved her. I looked down at him, my expression devoid of any human warmth. You loved me so much that you let your mistress slap my face? You loved me so much that you helped Vivian pin me down while she held a razor to my skin? I turned my gaze toward Eliana. Eliana was trembling so violently she couldn't stand. She was hyperventilating, her hands clutching at her throat. Eliana, I said softly. You mentioned you wanted the diamond ring I was looking at. The 5-carat cushion cut from Harry Winston, right? Abby. Eliana stammered, dropping her head until her forehead pressed against the floorboards. I was blind. I was crazy. We were best friends for years. Remember college? Remember when I shared my lunch with you? Please, for the sake of our past, spare my family. My father had a heart attack this morning. Our house is being seized. We have nowhere to go. Your father's heart attack is between him and his doctors, I replied calmly. And as for our friendship, you placed a $20,000 price tag on it when you bought the sweet keys from Tristan's driver. I raised my right hand slightly. The large projector screens behind the stage flickered to life. Instead of the corporate promotional video for the Southern Development Project, high-definition security footage began playing in a loop. The footage showed the hallway of the penthouse suite from Tuesday night. Kai dragging me by my hair down the corridor. Eliana ripping my clothes and laughing while slapping my cheek. Vivian raising the box cutter, screaming deranged threats, and preparing to live stream my humiliation to the entire city. The audio was crisp, clear, and sickening. If you want someone to blame, blame yourself for having no power or influence. You deserve to be sold off like cheap goods. Kai's voice boomed through the ballroom sound system. Imagine how nice it would be if I carved the word slut right into that pretty face of yours. Vivian's manic cackle filled every corner of the room. The entire ballroom erupted into an uproar. Several high society women covered their mouths in horror, while corporate executives shook their heads in utter revulsion. Vivian Kincaid curled into a tight ball on the floor, clawing at her own ears to block out the sound of her own voice. Turn it off, turn it off. Vivian shrieked hysterically. Tristan, make them turn it off. Why turn it off, Ms. Kincaid? I asked, walking over until I stood 3 feet from where she lay. You wanted a live stream, didn't you? You wanted everyone in the Capitol to see what happens when a woman offends you. I merely expanded your audience. Tristan took the microphone from the podium, his voice cutting through the noise like a broadsword. As chairman of Harlan Group, Tristan announced, his eyes sweeping across the gathered reporters and executives, I formally declare that Harlan Group and all 64 of its subsidiary conglomerates have terminated every direct and indirect contract with the Kincaid, Vaughn, and Sinclair families. He paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle over the room. Furthermore, all evidence of attempted human trafficking, aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit murder, and corporate extortion has been handed over directly to the Minister of Justice. There will be no bail. There will be no settlements. Anyone in this room who attempts to offer financial or legal assistance to these 3 individuals will be treated as an enemy of the Harlan family. A chill swept through the room. Not a single person dared to breathe loudly, let alone speak up on their behalf. The heavy oak double doors of the ballroom were pushed open once again. This time, 8 uniformed federal prosecutors and 12 armed officers from the Special Investigation Division marched inside, handcuffs gleaming under the chandeliers. The lead prosecutor stepped up to Kai, Vivian, and Eliana, displaying the official warrants. Kai Vaughn, Eliana Sinclair, Vivian Kincaid. You are under arrest for attempted murder, human trafficking, and grand financial fraud. You have no right to bail. Under the National Security Protocol, take them away. As the officers hauled Kai up, his legs went completely limp. He dragged his feet across the floor, screaming hoarsely toward the stage. Abby, forgive me. Just tell them you forgive me. I'll be your dog. I'll clean your shoes for the rest of my life. Abby. An officer shoved a gag into Kai's mouth, silencing his frantic wailing, and dragged him out into the flashing red and blue lights waiting outside the hotel. Eliana was sobbing so hard she choked on her own saliva, her designer dress torn and ruined as she was carried out between 2 female officers. Vivian was the last to be dragged out. As she passed by the front row, the lace headband slipped completely from her brow, exposing the horrific, uneven red scars carved across her forehead. The cameras of 50 journalists flashed in rapid succession, immortalizing her ruined face on the front page of every major newspaper in the country. When the doors finally swung shut behind them, the ballroom fell back into respectful silence. I turned back toward the audience, standing side by side with Tristan at the center of the stage. Now, I said, my voice steady and commanding, let us proceed with the signing of the $10 billion Southern Development Project. Applause erupted, deafening, sincere, and filled with a newfound terror and respect for the young woman who had survived the wolves and returned to claim the throne. 3 months later, the maximum security wing of the Capitol Penitentiary was damp, cold, and buried 40 feet beneath the earth. I walked down the concrete corridor, the sharp rhythm of my heels echoing off the reinforced steel bars. I wore a simple white cashmere coat and a pair of dark sunglasses, accompanied only by 2 plainclothes bodyguards. The guard stopped at cell number 104 and unlocked the heavy iron viewing slit. Inside sat Kai Vaughn. In 90 days, he had lost nearly 40 pounds. His hair was patchy, falling out from extreme stress and poor nutrition. His right hand remained twisted and deformed, set improperly in the prison infirmary because no specialist would touch an inmate marked by the Harlan family. When he heard the click of the lock, he lifted his hollow, sunken eyes. The moment he saw my face through the reinforced glass, he scrambled forward on his knees, pressing his scarred face against the partition. Abby, he whispered through the intercom speaker. You finally came to see me. I pulled up a metal chair and sat down slowly, resting my chin on my hands. I didn't come to see you, Kai, I said smoothly. I came to deliver a few updates. Kai stared at me, his breath fogging up the glass. Updates. Your father's company was completely liquidated last Tuesday, I said, my tone as casual as if I were discussing the weather. The family estate was auctioned off to pay for your outstanding business loans. Your mother and your younger sister are currently living in a shared basement apartment on the outskirts of the industrial district. Your sister had to drop out of university to work 12-hour shifts at a convenience store. Kai's eyes widened in horror. No, not my sister. She didn't do anything to you. And what did I do to you? I asked, tilting my head. I gave you 3 years of my life. I designed your company's entire operational framework. And you sold me for $20,000 and a project contract. Kai began to weep, pounding his forehead against the reinforced glass until small cracks of red appeared on his skin. I was wrong. Abby, I was wrong. Please help my family. Just give them a little money so they don't starve. Oh, they won't starve, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. I bought the convenience store where your sister works. I made sure she receives minimum wage, not a single penny more, and not a single penny less. They will live, Kai. They will live long, exhausting, miserable lives, working every single day just to pay off the interest on the debts you left behind. Kai collapsed against the concrete wall, clutching his head, his screams muffled by the thick glass. I stood up, adjusting the collar of my coat, and walked down the hall to cell number 108. Eliana sat in the corner of her cell, picking at the ragged edges of her prison uniform. When she looked up, her eyes were completely vacant, stripped of all the vanity and spite that had once defined her. Abigail, she croaked. The wedding ring, I said, leaning against the doorframe. The 5-carat diamond from Harry Winston. Eliana flinched. I bought it yesterday, I told her. I had the jeweler crush the diamond into powder and mix it into the mortar used to pave the visitor parking lot at this prison. Every time your family comes to visit you, they'll be driving right over the top of it. Eliana stared at me, her lower lip trembling violently before she buried her face in her hands and let out a broken, hopeless sob that would never be answered. I didn't bother visiting Vivian Kincaid. I knew enough from the warden's reports. Vivian had been sentenced to 22 years without parole. Every mirror in her cell block had been removed at her own hysterical request because she couldn't bear to catch a glimpse of the word carved into her own flesh. Justice was complete, not through a quick, merciful bullet, but through the long, slow, inescapable grinding of their own sins. The afternoon sun was cool and golden as my car pulled up to the private hillside cemetery overlooking the northern bay. The grass was trimmed to perfection. White marble headstones stood in silent rows bathed in the quiet rustle of autumn leaves. I walked up the stone path alone, carrying a single bouquet of white irises, my mother's favorite flower. When I reached the crest of the hill, I saw a tall figure standing before the polished black granite tombstone. Tristan was wearing a simple black coat, his silver hair ruffled by the sea breeze. He didn't turn around as I approached, but his shoulders visibly relaxed. The moment he heard my footsteps, I stepped up beside him and placed the irises gently on the cold stone. The engraving on the monument was simple. Evelyn Harlan, beloved wife and mother, forever at rest. We stood in silence for a long time, the wind carrying the distant cry of seagulls over the water. Are you happy with the outcome? Tristan asked softly, his voice rough with old grief and lingering regret. Happy isn't the right word, I replied, looking out over the blue ocean. Relieved maybe. Clean. Tristan looked down at his own hands, then turned to look at me. Your mother. She always wanted you to live a peaceful life. Away from the corporate backstabbing, away from the filth of the Harlan name. That's why she left you that private trust fund before she died. She wanted you to be free. I thought I could be free by running away, I said, touching the silver iris pin on my lapel. I thought if I hid in a small apartment and worked like an ordinary person, I could escape who I was. But the world doesn't work that way, Dad. If you don't hold the sword, someone else will use it to cut your throat. Tristan's eyes softened with a mixture of immense pride and profound sorrow. You're stronger than I ever was, Abby, he murmured. I spent my life collecting wealth and power, but I couldn't protect the woman I loved. I failed, Evelyn. And for 7 years I failed you. I turned my head and looked at the man beside me. The anger that had burned inside me for 7 years. The hatred that had driven me out of the mansion into the cold streets, into the arms of a traitor like Kai had finally burned itself out. What remained wasn't complete forgiveness, but an understanding forged through blood and fire. You didn't fail me on Tuesday night, I said quietly. Tristan looked up, his breath catching in his throat. You broke the door down. I continued, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. For the first time in years. You were right on time. A single tear slipped down Tristan's cheek, which he quickly wiped away with the back of his glove, clearing his throat to hide the tremor in his voice. I will always break the door down, Abby, he said firmly. As long as I'm drawing breath. I took a step forward, looping my arm through his. Let's go home, Dad, I said. We have a board meeting on Monday morning and I hear 3 of the senior directors are thinking about testing my patience. Tristan chuckled, a deep booming sound that echoed across the quiet hillside, filled with the terrifying joy of a father who had finally brought his daughter back to his side. May God have mercy on them, Tristan said, patting my hand with his heavy, protective grip. Because I know you won't. Side by side, the two titans of the Harlan dynasty walked down the stone path. Together, leaving the past buried in the earth, ready to rule the city that belonged to them.